Hi, my name's Phil and welcome to LabourVision, where we talk about Labour policies in a way which doesn't get covered in the mainstream media. In this video, I'm going to discuss something that is not technically a policy, but is very important in understanding how politics works in the real world, outside the usual echo chambers. And that is how economics has to function within the political sphere if you're ever going to persuade voters that you are running the ship of state competently, or will run the ship of state competently when you're in opposition. And the inspiration for this video, it's a series of bad takes where some people have taken a headline in the Telegraph and without either reading the article, noting that it's a Tory newspaper, or understanding the politics behind it, people have drawn the conclusion that Rachel Reeves doesn't understand the basics of economics. This would be Rachel Reeves, who has a master's degree in economics and has worked as an economist in both the UK and the USA. But sure, she knows less about economics than assorted backseat drivers on Twitter. But anyway, what is the source of their angst? Well, it's this headline: Rachel Reeves, my mum showed me how to balance the books at the kitchen table. That's it. That's the entire basis of their meltdown. So what's the issue? Well, what's upsetting them is that they are claiming that the economy of a country is nothing like the budget of a household. And so by saying this, Reeves doesn't know anything about economics. Now, on the one hand, first of all, Reeves is not suggesting that this is a reason for her being able to run the economy, but never mind that for now. Because despite, as I said, her academic and professional background in, shall we say, yes, working as an economist at the Bank of England. So first things first. No, the economy of a country is nothing like the budget of a household. With a household budget, you have almost no levers with which to impact either your income or your outgoings, really. You might be able to negotiate for more money from your boss and raise your income. Probably very low chances of success in most cases. You might be able to negotiate a better deal for a new kitchen you want to buy or insurance premium, but you can't haggle at the cost of your energy bill. Also, you don't print your own money. I mean, technically neither does the Chancellor, but they do at least get to talk to the people who can at the Bank of England. One of the major differences, however, between a national economy and household budget, in practical terms, is how you approach the concept of debt and borrowing. With a household budget, most debt you get into is almost always related to something you want to have rather than an investment. You don't really invest with household borrowing. I mean, getting a mortgage, that will save you money in the long term over continuing to rent. But most of the things you borrow for in a household budget are for the purposes of essentially luxury items. There's no financial return. Yes, you might need a car, but do you need the car you end up getting? You know, the same with hiring tradesmen to your kitchen or a conservatory. You may borrow for these things, but they don't make you a return. So it's just a cost. It's a debt that means a cost. And because you're going to borrow for it, you're actually going to pay more than if you just saved for it, for example. Depending on the difference between interest rates and inflation, I suppose, over the cost of the repayment. However, if an economy is being run in the long-term interests of your country, then public borrowing does yield a return. It's an investment. It produces higher GDP, which, as long as you have a fit-for-purpose taxation policy, will mean that the cost of servicing the debt down the line is covered by the extra taxes you naturally grow as a result of your economy growing. This essentially means that it doesn't matter how much a government borrows, as long as the borrowing is going to give a return that will pay for itself in the forms of the higher taxes, then the debt is covered. Obviously, you do have to be wary of economic crashes of the sort we saw with the banking crises and COVID, so you still need to be sensible. But ultimately, borrowing is less like borrowing for household budgets. It's more like borrowing for expanding your business. And although managing a national economy, particularly one that has its own currency, is also not like managing a business budget, it would be much better to think of it like that than a household budget. So why do we have this endless string of senior politicians of all parties who imply that their skills with a household budget are in any way relevant to their ability to manage a national economy? The reason is that the average voter literally knows nothing about economics. All I know of economics is what I have chosen to read and otherwise research out of my interest in politics. Most people don't do that. I've never had a single formal lesson during my time at school or university because, well, the government don't make even basic economics compulsory, and I followed a scientific path at A-level and beyond. And the same is true of almost all voters. They don't know the first thing about economics. Ask them to distinguish between the role of the Bank of England and the role of the Treasury. They don't know. If you're lucky, some might know that the Bank of England sets interest rates and the Treasury decides policies on taxation and public spending. That is probably the best you can hope for. And most voters may not even come up with that. It is a combination of the fact that there is no requirement from the government to teach people about economics, and our privatised media being more than happy for people to think that the national budget works basically the same as any other budget, including a household budget, which everyone is familiar with. And because there is no universe in which it's a good idea to tell a voter that they are too ignorant to understand economics, so they shouldn't worry their pretty little head about talk of borrowing and fiscal rules, just leave it to us, then politicians, even those genuinely wanting to deliver a stronger economy, have to conclude with this to an extent. After all, what is Rachel Reeves supposed to say in order to persuade voters that she's on their wavelength when it comes to managing the economy? Yes, she could try plugging her credentials. She could try saying, I've got a master's degree in economics and I've had a career as an economist before I entered Parliament. But that's not relatable for most people. But managing a household budget is. It's also reflecting a political reality. If you look at polling, which asks the public whether they're happy to borrow for investment or whether they want nationalised public services, most people answer positively. And you hold up these polls as evidence that Labour actually have more freedom than they seem to be acting with. But there are a couple of things to take into account. First, we have a first-past-the-post system. Majority public opinion counts for nothing, unless and until we change to a more representative system of electing MPs. So if you want majority public opinion to count for something, you want to change the system. It's really that simple. Second, some polls ask further questions. They ask if people would be happy to respond so positively if it would end up increasing the national debt or increasing the proportion of taxes needed to service that debt. At which point that majority in favour melts away. And this is what the Tories and their client media push all the time. And people say, but it won't, and I will say it won't. If you invest it and it does result in the economy growing, then the extra tax revenues that naturally accrue without you having to increase any rate of tax will cover the cost of servicing that debt. But who are the public going to believe? The established media outlets who are reporting on the weighty issues of the day, or the random Herbert on social media telling you that you're wrong about the way you think the economy works. And this is why Labour have always had to hold themselves to a higher standard than the Conservatives. The media will cover for economic incompetence from the Conservatives. They will cover for breaking their own fiscal rules, even their own manifesto promises. They will happily point to some global issue which is to blame and how it would be way worse under Labour. There is no cover for a Labour government. But the positive side to this injustice is that Labour have to deliver. It's not a political choice. It doesn't matter whether you think that you know more about economics than Reeves, because although, yes, she's got a master's degree in economics and experience at the Bank of England, you once read a blog post by someone who said you things that you like to believe. But the fact of the matter is that Labour must deliver economic growth, or they lose the election. So regardless of what Reeves says to make a connection with voters, how she engages with her advisors at the Treasury when working on the actual budget will be very different. But there we are. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, and until next time, I'll see you later.